Imagine standing on a battlefield and seeing 20,000 enemy soldiers marching toward you. That's like seeing an entire football stadium full of people walking straight at you with weapons. Now imagine you only have 3,000 soldiers on your side. Most people would say the battle is already over. They would say the smaller army has no chance. But in the year 1314, something incredible happened in Scotland. A small Scottish army faced a huge English army, and somehow the smaller army won. Not just a small win either. It was such a shocking victory that people still talk about it more than 700 years later. This battle is called the Battle of Bannockburn, and by the end of this story you'll understand exactly how a small group of Scots managed to defeat one of the biggest armies of their time. But first, we need to meet the leader of the Scottish army. His name was Robert the Bruce. At that time, Scotland and England were fighting because Scotland wanted to be its own country. England wanted to control Scotland, and for many years it looked like England was winning the war. Robert the Bruce decided he would fight to make Scotland free again. But things were very hard for him at the beginning. Some Scottish leaders didn't trust him. English armies were stronger and richer. And many battles went badly for the Scots. For several years Robert the Bruce had to hide in forests and mountains. Sometimes he had very few soldiers left. But slowly, little by little, he started winning back castles and land across Scotland. He was patient and clever. Instead of fighting big battles all the time, he attacked small English groups, captured castles, and made his army stronger. By the year 1314, he had taken back most of Scotland. But one very important castle was still controlled by England. That castle was Stirling Castle. Stirling Castle was incredibly important because it controlled the main road between northern and southern Scotland. Whoever held Stirling could control movement across the country. Robert the Bruce's brother began a siege to capture the castle. The English king, Edward II, could not allow this to happen. So he gathered a massive army and marched north to crush the Scottish rebellion once and for all. This English army was huge. Historians believe it had somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 soldiers. To understand how big that is, imagine filling a giant sports stadium with soldiers wearing armor, carrying weapons, and riding horses. The army included powerful knights in heavy armor, thousands of soldiers on foot, and archers who could shoot arrows from long distances. The most dangerous part of the English army was their cavalry, which means knights riding war horses. In medieval times, knights on horses were like the tanks of the battlefield. When they charged together, they could smash through enemy lines and send soldiers running. The Scottish army was much smaller. Robert the Bruce probably had around 6,000 soldiers in total. At first glance, it looked impossible for the Scots to win. But Robert the Bruce understood something very important about battles. Battles are not only about how many soldiers you have. They are also about where you fight and how you fight. So Robert the Bruce chose the battlefield very carefully. The battle would happen near a small stream called Bannockburn, just south of Stirling Castle. The land there was tricky. Some areas were wet, muddy, and swampy. Other areas had trees and uneven ground. This kind of land made it hard for large armies and horses to move quickly. That was exactly what Robert the Bruce wanted. If the English army couldn't spread out and use their cavalry properly, their huge numbers would not help them very much. But Bruce had another clever idea. His soldiers dug many small pits in the ground along parts of the battlefield. These pits were hidden and designed to trap horses. Imagine a knight riding forward at full speed during a charge, and suddenly the horse's leg falls into a hole. The horse crashes down, the knight falls, and the whole charge becomes messy and dangerous. But Bruce's most powerful weapon was his soldiers themselves. Most Scottish soldiers carried very long spears, some nearly as tall as a small tree. They trained to stand very close together in a formation called a schiltron. A schiltron looked like a giant circle or block of soldiers with all their spears pointing outward. Imagine a giant porcupine made of spears. Horses did not want to run into something like that. And if they did try, they could be badly hurt. Before the main battle even began, something dramatic happened that made the Scottish soldiers feel even more confident. One day an English knight named Sir Henry de Bohun spotted Robert the Bruce riding ahead of his army. Bruce was not wearing heavy armor. He was riding a small horse and holding a battle axe. To the knight, this looked like a perfect chance to attack the Scottish king. Sir Henry lowered his lance and charged straight toward Robert the Bruce. Imagine watching your king about to be hit by a charging knight. The Scottish soldiers must have been very worried. But Robert the Bruce stayed calm. At the last moment, he quickly moved his horse to the side. The charging knight rushed past him. As he passed, Bruce stood up in his saddle and swung his battle axe with all his strength. The axe struck the knight's helmet and knocked him off his horse. The knight died instantly. The Scottish soldiers burst into cheers. Their king had just defeated a powerful armored knight in front of everyone. Moments like that can completely change how soldiers feel. Suddenly the Scottish army believed they could actually win. The next day, the real battle began. The English army marched forward toward the Scottish lines. But almost immediately they ran into problems. The battlefield was narrow and muddy. Thousands of English soldiers were squeezed together. Knights couldn't move their horses properly. Archers couldn't see clearly because their own soldiers were in the way. Meanwhile, more English troops kept pushing forward from behind. The huge army started to feel like a giant traffic jam of soldiers and horses. At the same time, the Scottish army slowly moved forward in their spear formations. Step by step, the schiltrons looked like moving walls of spears. English knights tried to charge, but many horses stopped when they saw the spears. Others crashed into the formations and were thrown off their horses. English soldiers began to panic as the battle became messy and confusing. Then something unexpected happened. Behind the Scottish army were people who traveled with the soldiers' cooks, helpers, and other camp followers. When they saw the battle getting intense, many of them ran onto nearby hills waving flags and shouting. From far away, the English soldiers thought these people were new Scottish soldiers arriving to help. To the tired English troops, it looked like the Scottish army had suddenly become even bigger. That was the moment when things fell apart. Many English soldiers started to lose hope. And once soldiers begin to run away during a battle, it can spread very quickly. The English army began retreating. But the land behind them was muddy and full of water. Some soldiers fell into the marsh and couldn't stand up because their heavy armor pulled them down. Others were pushed and trampled by their own teammates trying to escape. The Scottish army kept moving forward. Soon the giant English army completely broke apart. Even King Edward II had to flee the battlefield with a small group of guards. Against all odds, the smaller Scottish army had won. The Battle of Bannockburn became one of the most famous victories in Scottish history. Robert the Bruce became a national hero, and the battle helped Scotland move closer to becoming an independent country. Years later, England finally agreed that Scotland would be its own kingdom. And the story of Bannockburn became a powerful reminder of something important. Sometimes the smaller side can win. Not because they are stronger, but because they are smarter, more determined, and better prepared. That's how a small army of Scots managed to defeat a much larger English force and make history that people still remember today. If you enjoyed learning about this incredible underdog story from history, make sure to like the video and subscribe. And if you want to see another amazing moment where a smaller army shocked the world, check out the next video on your screen.